Hey everybody, it's Charles, your hobby hero, coming at you with a video today where we're going to be reviewing all of the new enchantments for Into the Inklands and where I think they're going to end up in demand-wise and how that should be reflected in their overall pricing, as well as some that I think were just absolute mistakes on the part of Ravensburger. But before we get started, please hit that subscribe button down in the bottom corner. I do appreciate it. I do put out regular content about the hobbies that I love the most, with this channel being dedicated to the Lorcana card game. I'm also having 2 giveaways going on right now. I'll put the links down in the comments or in the description down below. Once we get to 1,000 subscribers and each of those videos gets 100 likes, I'll be giving away some of these starter decks from the new Into the Inklands set. Now, you heard me right. We're going to be breaking down each and every one of the 18 Enchanteds for this set. Yes, we have 6 additional Enchanteds over set 1 and set 2 with some surprise revelations from Ravensburger right before the set drops. I'm going to be going through each and every one of those, kind of talking about why I think it will be either higher or lower in demand, and then kind of giving you my overall thoughts at the end of the video on this wave of the Enchanteds. So without further ado, let's go ahead and check out those Enchanted cards. Okay, so here is our tier list. I have it kind of broken up into chase. These are the ones that I think will be like the ones that people are actively chasing to get in the set, similar to like your set 1 Elsa, your set 2 Cinderella. Now there could be more than just one chase in the set, but it is going to be kind of reserved for the ones that I think have the highest potential to be sought after. Followed by our high demand characters. These are going to be similar to like your princesses throughout the set 1 and 2, even the ones that didn't end up being in that chase category. I would put like Tinkerbell in like this high demand spot as well, or something like possibly the Enchanted Belle from set 1. And collectible, these are going to be ones that are, you know, semi-popular characters. These are going to be ones that have like their niche markets of collectors, could see some higher potential values. Obviously going to be sought after by people looking to complete the set for this one, but we'll also have some allure for people who are just wanting something for their favorite characters, possibly to use in their favorite decks, so forth and so on. And then the bottom category is the completionists only. And this is going to be the ones that I think the only people who are actually going to actively seek these out will be people who are just trying to complete the set of all the Enchanteds. I do think we're going to have some cards in this set that the values are so low that we could end up seeing people, you know, just buying up 4 to throw them in decks that they're getting played in, because they're, you know, not much more expensive than say a highly played super rare or legendary. I think we'll see some that are even lower prices than a lot of those cards as well. So we could see some of these on this list being more sought after just because they get so inexpensive that people will actually play with those particular cards too. So I did have these uploaded in order that they show up in the set, but it kind of randomized the order while we're in here. So I'm just going to kind of go through them in the order that they are on here, which is pretty random, but it is what it is. First up is Scrooge McDuck, and I am going to put him in the collectible category. I think this card is fringe playable, and I think this card is kind of like fringe on the popularity side. I could see people that have a real affinity for Scrooge McDuck. I, you know, grew up in the 90s with the DuckTales cartoon, and I, you know, played the, you know, the Nintendo game with Scrooge McDuck. So like I have an affinity for this character, but I'm also probably a bit older than their target demographic for this game. I could be wrong. He could have a bigger cult following than I know, but I think I'm pretty comfortable putting him in that collectible category, kind of in the same range as probably somebody like Lady Tremaine from set 2, you know, where you have a card that is playable. You have the artwork is decent enough. The background's a little bland on this one, but it's not bad artwork. He's holding his lucky dime here and could see a little demand just from the collectible side, but I think mostly this is going to fall into that category of people trying to finish their sets. I doubt highly that it gets low enough for people to be, you know, tossing these willy-nilly into their items decks, and I'm not entirely sure that the item deck even plays this guy, but he could see some play there. Now, Mickey Mouse, I'm going to put him in at the very top of the high demand here. He could honestly end up being the chase here. It's a big deal because this is our first legendary enchanted Mickey. It's not our first enchanted Mickey. We had 2 in set 1, but both of those were super rare versions of Mickey Mouse, where this is his first legendary enchanted. I also just think this card ability is going to appeal to a lot of players, not necessarily on a competitive side, but it is a very fun mechanic. Elvish Piper, if you're familiar with in Magic the Gathering, is a very, very similar card and has always been very popular among casual players for its ability just to play really big things if unanswered. And I do think this card is actually better than Elvish Piper in the sense that we just don't have instant speed removal. Like, your opponent can't deal with this Mickey Mouse on your turn. They can only address it with stuff on their turn, and they really only get to address it for one turn. Like, I mean, if you get to activate his ability once, that's really the only reason why you're playing this card. If you get a second activation off of him, that's just, you know, gravy on top of everything. This guy could see some play, like on the competitive side, just depending on what kind of character cards we get in the future. I don't know that there's a ton of cards right now that are good enough to warrant this kind of risky play in a deck, but we could see something in the future. But this guy will absolutely see a ton of play with your more casual gamers. For your collectors, Mickey Mouse is obviously a very popular character, very widely known character, so this one being his first legendary enchanted could also drive up that demand as well. But for right now, I'm going to put him in the high demand category, but like I said, he could end up being the set chase for this set as well, and I would not be surprised. Next one up is Robin Hood. I'm going to put Robin Hood above Scrooge, but down here, above Scrooge, if it lets me. We'll do it that way then. Above Scrooge in the collectible category down here. I think this card is playable, but similar to even Scrooge, I think the number of people who would collect Robin Hood as like a favorite type character are probably outside of the target demographic of the card game. I mean, this Robin Hood's a character that was old whenever I was a kid, as far as like the Disney products and stuff that were coming out. So I don't know that he's got a huge fan base currently to drive up that demand for enchanted cards of his. I'm also not crazy about this artwork. As far as character artworks go, it's one of my least favorite. The background is just so boring. There's literally nothing other than some slightly different colors of gray in the background of this card. So not a huge fan of the overall artwork, so I don't think that's really going to pull anybody in any particular direction. He is very playable, though. I could see this card being in a lot of the steel builds, especially with targets for this Robin Hood to come out and shift very earlier. So I do think that will help his value a little bit. But as we've seen in the past, that doesn't move the needle a ton on the collectible or on the price of these Enchanteds. I'd probably put him very close to like Set 1 Maui, who is extremely playable, but the art's not very popular, and then the character just doesn't have a huge following right now, so there's not a ton of demand for that particular Enchanted. All right, next one up is Chernabog here, and I'm going to put Chernabog towards the bottom of the high demand here, and he could end up in the kind of collectible tier. I would say he's probably closer to the top end of collectible than the bottom of high demand, but I personally like him a little bit better probably than I should. I think the artwork is just fantastic. I think it really just captures how menacing and just crazy powerful this guy looks. He's also just like an all-time iconic Disney villain. Again, maybe a little dated for the target demographic here. Like, Fantasia is not a grossly popular show by any means, but I think most people are familiar with the more iconic scenes from Fantasia, even if they haven't sat and watched the whole thing. You know, the brooms and the Sorcerer Mickey, and then you just have Chernabog as this big evil villain from this movie, and this artwork just absolutely captures how crazy powerful he is. I think the card is very playable. I know there's a lot of people who are trying to get his cost all the way down to 0. to really make him work, or flop him out on turn 3, 4, or whatever. But honestly, this guy hits late game at a discount. It's still really good. If you're able to, follow up your opponent's Be Prepared with this guy at 4, and then like another like really good 5 or 6 drop afterwards, like that's just a ton of threat that you can put on the board. I mean, honestly, even just playing him down with 2 smaller characters to protect you from like a Lady Tremaine, and really just forcing them to have like another Be Prepared right after their first Be Prepared. I do think this guy has some real potential just as protection in those decks, because again, getting this guy even at 5 or 6 to get a 9/9/3 lore generator is a huge discount, and I do think he will see some play. But all in all, I just think he's a very iconic villain, and this artwork is just perfectly captures how just big of a baddie he really is. Next up is Kaeya. I'm going to put Kaeya as our first entry into the chase. She is our only princess that we have this set, and the princess premium has shown to be a real thing. I do think just as a pop culture princess, I think she's kind of hitting that probably right in the right spot for the target demographic of this particular game. I think a lot of your early 30s, late 20-year-olds kind of grew up with the Treasure Planet and the Atlantis series, and these kind of characters are really not been given a whole lot of representation in a lot of Disney products. So I do think that is kind of going to show how much of a demand there really is for this card. Also, this artwork is just fantastic. It is phenomenal capture. I mean, if you've seen the Atlantis movie, when this scene happens, I mean, I still get cold chills when I watch, her kind of emerge from the waters with this power up, and like the artwork is just phenomenal on this card. That combined, again, with the fact that I do think she is a popular character that just doesn't have a whole lot of like collectibles out there to get, and that she is our only kind of competition for people who are collecting, just the princesses from these Enchanted sets. I do think she'll end up being at a higher premium. May not be the most expensive one for this set, but I do think she's going to be a contender for it. All right, next one up is Jafar. I'm going to put Jafar right underneath Mickey Mouse here in this high demand category. I think this character, I think Jafar is a very popular villain for sure. I think he has a really strong artwork on his base card to where, like, I think this artwork is good, but I don't think it's like a huge difference in quality of artwork from this to his Enchanted. So I do think that does hurt it a little bit. If you're looking for, just a really great looking Jafar character and the normal legendary one kind of sucks, but you have this Enchanted option, I do think that would help the Enchanted. But like, I personally think that the legendary artwork's better than the Enchanted artwork. Now, obviously, the Enchanted has its foiling and, the extended borders, so it has that working for it. And I'm not saying that the legendary one will be worth more or anywhere near as much as the Enchanted one, but I do think it does hurt the Enchanted whenever the legendary has such strong artwork. This is a very collectible character. I do think its playability right now is like way over exaggerated. I think there are some really good combos with Jafar, and we'll talk about that potential in another video probably this week. But I think that it's a bit slower and a bit clunky and a bit too reliant on a single card in your deck to really be a consistent contender for like tournament play. I think it'll be a ton of fun, and I do think it will get played. I just don't know if it would be super competitive enough to, help move the value of this at all. I think a lot of the value is going to come from the fact that it's Jafar. It is still good artwork. He's a popular villain, and he is going to be, some version of playability in the current format. Next up, we have Maleficent, and I am going to also put Maleficent up here in this chase category. While her original show is definitely dated, she has become one of the most popular, if not the most popular, Disney villain. She's just got a ton of fans. We have live action versions of her coming out now with Angelina Jolie. Like, you have a lot of people, like, I don't even know if you technically classify her as a villain with the newer Disney projects that have come out for Maleficent. Like, she is just a grossly popular villain right now, and I don't see that going anywhere. I think the fact that this is, with all the Maleficent cards we've had so far, this is our first Maleficent Enchanted, is going to make this card a very big contender as one of the top chase cards from this Enchanted set. Now, the things I think do work against it is I don't think this is a particularly good card. I do think it's understated for its cost, and even with its ability, it takes a lot of setup, and I don't think that's really what you're looking for in a legendary that costs 5. And this artwork, while an iconic pose, doesn't do a whole lot for me. There's not a lot going on in it. We've seen this pose a number of times. There's not a ton of background elements going on it. Like, the detail is not on the same level as some of the other ones, like your Chernabog or even your Kaeya up here. So I do think that is going to hurt it from a collector's standpoint. But again, I do think Maleficent, from the characters that are in this set, I think Maleficent is far and away the most popular, character as far as like people who collect like specific stuff. I mean, you have Mickey Mouse, of course. He's got kind of his own tier of collectability. But as far as like your other characters in here, I do think Maleficent's kind of got the most pull for this chase spot for this set. Next one, we've got Morph. I'm going to put Morph, I think, at the bottom of high demand. I kind of want to point him towards collectible. This is kind of one that, similar to like Kaeya up here, I'm not entirely sure what his cult following is, because there's just not a ton of opportunity for people who are a fan of Morph to really collect Morph stuff, because it's not out there. Now, like, I know who Morph is. I grew up, again, with those shows. Those were kind of coming out when I was, getting out of middle school, going into high school. So those were kind of the Disney shows of that era of my life. But I mean, like, he's not like a hugely important character in the show. Like, he's an integral part to the plot, but like, he doesn't even talk. Like, he has no ability to communicate. Like, he's just a little shape-shifting blob that's in there. Now, it kind of fulfills like that, pet aspect of the Disney projects, but honestly, we haven't really seen any Enchanteds of like the pets of any of these princesses or anything like that up until this point. So I'd be interested to see how he performs. Now, I do think the card is playable. I don't know like that I would say it's like, super highly competitive playable, but it could end up being, if we see, just a huge shift engine deck and him kind of being like the redundancy in those shift engines. But I doubt very highly that, I don't think he's going to end up in the chase category. He may end up outperforming some of these high demand characters, but I think it's probably more likely that he ends up kind of maybe towards the top of the more collectible character category on this list. Next up, we have Ursula. Now, Ursula, I'm going to put here in the high demand. I would love it if she ends up in the chase category. I do think she's popular enough. She's certainly playable enough. I think, honestly, out of the Enchanteds we have, she's the most playable Enchanted we have. And this artwork on this card is phenomenal. Far and away my favorite artwork out of any of these, and I am halfway tempted to get 4 of these and actually play with them, just because I think I want to look at that card as much as possible while I'm playing this game. Just absolutely gorgeous artwork. I hope it does end up in the chase category, but playability has not made a huge impact on values. I think out of set 2, Lady Tremaine is one of the most playable, if not the most played Enchanted out of that entire list. She is also a gorgeous artwork, one of my favorite artworks from the set 2 Enchanteds, and she's one of the least valuable Enchanteds. I think Namari and Pete are right there neck and neck with her for the bottom tier of the Enchanteds from that set. So, like, clearly artwork and playability don't affect the price enough for me to think that will catapult her into this chase category. Now, I do think Ursula is considerably more popular than Lady Tremaine, but I don't know that there's a ton of people out there that are collecting Ursula. I hope this card is the standout of it. I think it deserves to be the standout of the Enchanteds, but just realistically, I think it will probably be one of the better performing Enchanteds, but I don't think it'll be in the same category as the chase, the ones that we have in the chase category up here. Captain Hook, I'm going to put him towards the bottom of collectible. Again, I don't think he's a very popular character. I think we all know who he is, but I don't know anybody who's, a Captain Hook collector. This, artwork, the painted artwork style for him doesn't do a whole lot for me. He's got a little bit of the Jolly Roger in the background, which is fine, I guess. But I mean, the card I don't think is playable. I don't see a whole lot of demand for this outside of people trying to kind of assemble the character Enchanteds out of the set. I don't imagine he'll be in a much better spot than like Pete from set 2, and I certainly don't even think he's going to be like in the same category as like either Simba or Genie from set 1. I just don't think there's enough demand for this guy outside of just putting Enchanted sets together. Peter Pan kind of right there with him, and I'll put him in front since their artwork kind of goes together. When I spoiled Peter Pan, and I had a feeling that Captain Hook was coming because of their regular rare artwork going together, and as you can see, like their enchanted artwork kind of goes together as well, which I don't think makes a very appealing background. I mean, they're not even looking at each other. There's no real feud or anything here. Captain Hook's posing for the camera, and Peter Pan's looking, off into the distance with his back turned to his mortal enemy. I don't think it goes together great. So I'm not sure why they decided to, kind of tie these two images together. Similar to Captain Hook, I think Peter Pan's marginally more popular from a collector standpoint, but I don't think even Peter Pan collectors, I don't think this is the Peter Pan they're going to try to collect. Like for me personally, like in set 2, Hercules, I'm a big fan of Hercules. He's one of my favorite characters, but the Hercules they chose for the Floodborn artwork, just it wasn't the Hercules that I grew up with, so I didn't really feel any affinity towards that Hercules or any desire to pick it up or purchase it. If I opened it, great, that's fine, but I didn't seek it out, and I think that's kind of where Peter Pan dressed like a pirate is kind of going to fall in that category for a lot of them. And then the last of our character cards, we've got Grandma Tala, and I'm going to put her at the very bottom. I don't like this artwork at all. I mean, I don't know that there's a ton of ways to make a really interesting piece with Grandma Tala. I know for me personally, whenever she transcended and kind of turned into like the water spirits, like there were some really great lighting and artwork effects there, so maybe tying more of that into the image could have helped, but I was not a fan of this artwork at all. I think the card is playable, but I don't know that it's going to be like a tier 1 in any kind of tier 1 type decks, and I don't think that there's anyone out there that is collecting Grandma Tala as a favorite character. I think there are a lot of strong characters from Moana, and I don't think she is, going to be on the top of that list. I mean, I think like Hey would probably outperform Grandma Tala by a good margin, and we already saw Maui, who is a fairly popular character in set 1, kind of fall towards the bottom of the barrel as well. So I just don't think there are a ton of people that really resonate with a lot of those characters yet. In the future, could be. But I just don't see it right now as her being a really high demand character out of here. All right, then we're going to get into our non-character ones. And before we get started here, I would just like to go on record and say I think these were all a mistake. I don't think this was a good idea. I think there are locations in the Disney world of IPs that could have made good Enchanteds. And I think there are some Disney items that could make it as well in that thing. And I don't think they did a great job selecting the ones they had. Like, for example, I think if, Cinderella's Castle, which is iconic at the parks, obviously has just a ton of history around it. It's what their logo is. Like, I think that has the potential to even be like a chase location, and I'm sure we will see it in the future. But like Belle's house, like that is just not something that most people are going to care about, and that's going to be the same thing on a lot of these. It also just makes the artwork really tricky. Like how do you draw Pride Rock differently? So, like you have the regular Pride Rock artwork in this set, like boom, change it. Like how do you do that? Like, well, we'll just shoot it from the other side of Pride Rock, and like that just does not create a ton of extra value for me, and I don't think it's going to create a ton of extra value for these cards. So I'll go ahead and say that we'll put Belle's here. It's going to be our first entry into Completionists only. Like, again, this card is probably playable. It could get so inexpensive that people just buy 4 of them to play in this deck. If this deck is a thing, this items type deck. But outside of that, there's nobody out there, like prior to this set coming out, that you can honestly tell me, oh yeah, I collect, Belle's House merchandise. Like even if you are a big Beauty and the Beast fan, like none of this screams Beauty and the Beast. Like there's nothing in this image right now. I mean, I don't know if you can see any of the titles on any of these books. Maybe it's like there's a reference on some of those books, but there's nothing in here that I'm like, oh, like if you covered up the name of this, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's Belle's house from Beauty and the Beast. Like there's just nothing there. Like I'm pretty sure this item is not even from Beauty and the Beast. I think this is something from Lorcana, like the new world that they've created. Like it just has no collector's value other than the fact that it is one of the additional Enchanteds that were added in here. Kuzco's Palace will go down in history as the first uncommon Enchanted we get. Again, I don't think this card is playable, and the fact that it is an uncommon and an Enchanted and a location that most people, again, would not even be able to draw if you went to ask them, like, hey, what's Kuzco's Palace look like from The Emperor's New Groove? Like, you may get a what in regards to the movie even. Like, again, another, underrated favorite of mine, but this is not a card that I wanted from Kuzco. He's one of my favorite characters in set 1. I was really, hoping that Emerald would get to a spot where I could play him some more. This is not the Emerald edition that I think is going to get Kuzco there. And unfortunately, this card I could see being, worth less than even the value of a pack at some point. I don't think it will be right at release, but I would not be surprised if this ends up kind of being like a bulk type card for this set, because there's just not going to be enough demand. Like there's the only thing that is going to give this thing any kind of value is people who are trying to collect all 18 of these. Like those are literally the only people who are going to want this card. And for people who buy a case and crack this as their one hit per case, I already feel bad for you. Like it's already got me scared to open up my case. I just hope that that's not what we open. Pride Lands. I'm gonna put Pride Lands at the very bottom of collectible. I do think that the Lion King just has a big enough following. Like I think this is the most popular Disney movie that, probably out of any of the Disney movies that have come out. Maybe not like currently most popular, but like just overall like widely known. Like this location is very iconic to the movie, so I can see it holding a special spot for somebody who really cares about the Lion King, who really cares about Simba and the Pride Lands, etc. Like I am not that person, and again, I think it's absolutely silly that basically this is just the exact same artwork as the rare in the set, just from the other side of Pride Rock, which again, how do you draw a jutting rock more, dynamically and entertainingly? I mean, I think they could have done like the image where Simba was being held up on the location and you see all the animals around, maybe, kind of like, populate the Pride Lands for the Enchanted versus the other one. Again, I think this card's very good. I think it will see play, potentially very competitive play, as well as the cost reduction is quite good. But again, still not a card I want to open. I think it will be cheap enough to play that, like I said, we could see people buying 4 of these and playing in their competitive decks, just because it's not a very expensive enchanted to acquire. Next one, we got the RLS Legacy. I'm going to put it at the top of completionist only, as I think it's probably the second most playable location. The RLS Legacy, again, huge fan of Treasure Planet. Could not have told you the name of this ship if you paid me $1 million without a Google search. So I don't think that there's anybody out there who is seriously collecting these ships. I could see again, though, that this could be a very playable card and people just picking up multiples of them in Enchanted because they're not an expensive card to pick up. But that usually, again, doesn't move the needle very much as far as collectability goes. If this becomes the tier 1 deck in the meta, I still don't think this moves the needle very much. As I said, like Lady Tremaine right now is the most played, Enchanted that we've seen across 2 sets. And she is almost the least valuable of any of the Enchanteds out of set 2. So I don't foresee this one being an exception to that rule because of it being in a location. If anything, the fact that it's not a character is just going to hurt it to a point to where it really can't recover. All right, next one up is the Sorcerer's Hat. And I'm going to put this one just above the Pride Lands in the collectible category. This is one of the few items, like I said, that I think people will resonate with. Like we were talking about earlier when we were talking about Chernabog, like the Sorcerer Mickey and the brooms, like it's such an iconic part of like Disney history. We used to have the giant hat at MGM in Orlando. Like obviously that's gone now. Like people missed it. There were petitions to keep it. Like this is something like that people would actually collect. That Sorcerer Mickey hat is a very iconic item from Disney's past, and I do think like it is one of the few items worthy of an Enchanted. So I still don't think that it's going to end up outperforming any of the character cards. It could possibly pass up some of these other ones in the collectible category. I certainly don't think it's going to be one of the higher value ones, mostly because, again, I don't think this card is very playable. I think it's just going to have that collector aspect going for it. And then the fact that it is the first item Enchanted that we had may long-term increase the value of this card. I think out of the gates, at least anyways, it's probably going to be one of the lower value Enchanteds that we have as well. And then that brings us to our final one on the list. Along Came Zeus. I'm going to put that one at the bottom of collectible. One, this artwork is absolutely banger artwork. I do think that there, again, are some songs and some actions. Actually, I don't think there's some action. I think there are some songs that would make some decent Enchanteds. This one, again, I told you earlier, like Hercules is my favorite Disney movie, and this is not, I still wouldn't say that this is an iconic enough song to be in that Enchanted category. Like, When You Wish Upon a Star, Hakuna Matata, Circle of Life, like those big blockbusters out of some of the bigger movies that are out there, I think could do really well as Enchanteds. And this one, I think, is an extremely playable card for this set. The artwork is very, very good. It is still not a character, and I think as such, its value will be on the lower end of the Enchanteds, which could, then trigger people to buying it so that they have the artwork in their deck, which I firmly support. Again, this artwork for this card is fantastic, but again, I don't think that's going to be enough to move it up past any of the character cards in the set. If it does, not very many of them. I would say, at the best case scenario, I would say for any of these non-character Enchanteds would be to honestly not even above Robin Hood. Probably, here between Robin Hood and Scrooge, and just passing up like these bottom 4. And I think that's absolute best case scenario. Would love to be wrong, but I don't see it very likely given the history of the enchanted cards. So there you guys have it. There are all the new enchanteds that we're going to see in Into the Inklands, as well as where I think they're going to end up demand-wise. Now, like I said in the video, I do think that the locations were a mistake at this point in time. I do think there are locations, items, and songs that could potentially be at that level that we expect to see from enchanted cards. Unfortunately, we didn't see much of that in this set, so I'm hoping going forward they really reserve like those locations or enchanted actions or enchanted items for those truly special cards, because just throwing them on uncommons or unimportant locations just really feels anticlimactic, and nobody wants to open their first enchanted after cracking hundreds of packs and have it be something not special to them. So hopefully this is kind of a one and done to roll out the new location aspect of Into the Inklands, and from going forward we see a much more limited and much more reserved location or item or song inclusion for those enchanteds. But those are my thoughts on the set's enchanteds. I would love to hear yours down in the comment section below. Until next time guys, Hobby Hero out.